All right, welcome. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom. I'm Carlos Diaz. I'm the founding director, and this is our first event with the newest cohort of senior leadership fellows, an amazing group of public servants. Because we're fairly new, I still like to introduce our events with a couple of words about who we are and what we do. We were created by the legislature and the governor of Florida about 3 years ago to harness the power of rigorous research, excellence in education, mentorship, and effective public outreach to offer a better understanding of the free market system and its impact on individual freedom and human prosperity around the world. But because we're in Miami, we have a special interest, of course, in the United States, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Through our different activities and programs, we hope to inspire and enlighten policy discussions, analysis, and decision-making. We basically work at the intersection of public policy and the free market. And we like to think of ourselves as a world-class, independent, nonpartisan think tank that aims to inform, to influence, and to inspire current and future leaders to develop and implement innovative, meaningful, and effective public policies to advance individual freedom and human prosperity. We have a number of programs and events, and the way I look at it, the crown jewel of these programs is the Senior Leadership Fellows Program, which is a program that brings to our center, to FIU, to Miami, every semester, 4 public servants at the highest levels of government. People who have served in their countries with distinction, people who come here to Miami to teach, to mentor students. They teach, we call them study groups. These are 8-session seminars that are not for credit, so students who go there do it because they want to be there, not because they're going to get a credit. So they're here for a couple of months, and they teach on a variety of topics. I'm going to ask them about what they're going to be teaching in a few minutes. And they take part in a number of public events just like this one. So the purpose of this event is to introduce you to this amazing group of public servants and to kick off the semester with the Senior Leadership Program. Classes begin this week. In fact, the first one began just a couple of hours ago. And the next ones are going to take place over the next few days. And so they're going to be here for the next 2 months or so, and they're going to be accessible to all of you, to all members of the community. The study groups are for FIU affiliates only, but the events will be completely public, just like this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly introduce you to each one of them. They really need no introduction, but I'm going to spend about a minute on each one of them, and I know I'm going to really summarize what is a very impressive set of CVs for each one of them. And then I'm going to ask them, each one of them, a series of questions related to what they're going to be teaching, related to their countries, some current events. And so we're going to be doing that for the next hour and 15 minutes. And then I want to leave some time for you to ask questions, any questions that you want to ask. We don't filter questions, so feel free to ask whatever is on your minds. Before we do that, I want to recognize a couple of people who are here. A former Senior Leadership Fellow herself, Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, who served a couple of years ago and is now a member of our board. Another member of the board, Javier Cárdenas, the president of the board, in fact, here with us as well. We have an elected official, Monica Colucci, who is a member of the School Board of Miami-Dade County, who's also with the center. Felix Madariaga, where are you, Felix? Presidential candidate in Nicaragua. And I'm sure I'm missing somebody that I haven't seen, but if I do, raise your hand and I will recognize you, although it's probably embarrassing to raise your hand and be recognized. But anyway, all right, so I'm going to briefly introduce you to them. And we'll kick it off. For the president, I'm going to be conducting the interview in Spanish, so I'll be translating what he says. And so I'm going to begin alphabetically, which is how they're seated, with the Attorney General. And one thing I want to say, this program that we have, I think, is amazing, in part because we have public servants come in and mentor. And I think there's a lot of value in teaching, in having people teach who have served in the government a long time ago. And certainly we've had former public servants, even presidents who served many, many years ago and have done an outstanding job. We just gave an award to one of them, President Álvaro Uribe of Colombia, who did an amazing job. But it's also amazing how some of these individuals were in government recently. In one case, you were heading a major government agency of the United States 3 years ago. You were ambassador a year and a month ago. You were president 2 months ago. But in the case of the Attorney General, he's not the former attorney, he's the current Attorney General of Colombia. By the time he begins teaching, he will be the former. He has 2 more weeks on the job.
Yeah, of course.
He's remarkable in part because he actually got to complete his 4-year term, which in Colombia, that's not always the case.
Yeah.
So he's not the former Attorney General, he's the sitting Attorney General of Colombia. And he's about to complete his 4-year term. Before becoming Attorney General, he served 20 years as a legal advisor in public institutions within the executive, legislative, and judicial branches in Colombia. He acted as a special prosecutor of the National Human Rights Unit at the Attorney General's office between 2003 and 2004. He has served as an external advisor to any number of local, the equivalent of state and national positions. So he has plenty of public service experience, and he has been in the news recently for his strong defense of the rule of law. And so the rule of law will be at the heart of what he'll be teaching in his study group. We have President Guillermo Lasso, who was president of Ecuador from 2021 until 2023, just a couple of months ago. He also has a decades-long career both in the private and in the public sector. In the private sector, he has held important positions in various financial institutions. And in the public sector, he's been governor, he's been minister of the economy, founded a think tank, founded a political party, and ran for president on 3 different occasions. And on the 3rd one, he became president. So he'll talk to us about his experience as president of a country where presidents really have a difficult time staying on to their job. So he'll talk about leadership and what it's like to transition from the private to the public sector. Speaking of the private and public sector, we have Chairman Kimberly Reed, who's the former president of the Export-Import Bank of the United States. She was the first woman in charge of the board of directors, president and CEO of the bank, which is the nation's official $135 billion export credit agency. And she served from 2019 until 2021 after being confirmed by the U.S. Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support. She has been recognized as one of the 100 women leaders in STEM and as one of the most powerful women in Washington, according to Washingtonian magazine. Before that, she acted as counsel to 3 committees of the U.S. Congress, where she conducted oversight and investigations, and she currently serves on the boards of directors of several public companies. And Ambassador Carlos Vecchio, who was the former Venezuelan ambassador to the U.S. from 2019 until 2023, he led the process of recognizing the interim governor of Venezuela before the Organization of American States, the OAS, and the U.S. government. He encouraged bipartisan support for Venezuelan freedom and played a crucial role in shaping U.S. sanctions against the Maduro's regime and persuading the U.S. to become the main donor of humanitarian aid to Venezuela. He led the legal strategy for taking control of Citgo, which, as you know, is Venezuela's primary asset in the U.S., and managed the Venezuelan migration crisis in the U.S., securing TPS and deferred enforced departure for Venezuelan migrants here in the U.S. And we're going to be accompanied by his former boss, President Guaido, pretty shortly. So we'll have a good Venezuelan contingency coming up. So this is the newest group of senior leadership fellows, and I want you to join me in welcoming them officially to the center. All right, so I'm going to begin asking each one of them a different question about their time in office, about their outlook, and then we'll take it from there. And we'll do it alphabetically. I'm going to start with the Attorney General. You're about to leave your term in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you've been very blunt in your criticisms of President Petro and what you have called out as abuses of power. He has been very blunt in his criticisms of you. He has accused you of everything under the sun, including sedition and all sorts of pretty serious crimes. As you reflect on your time as Attorney General, what would you say is your biggest legacy? What would you want Colombians to remember about the 4 years of Barbosa's tenure as Attorney General?
Well, thank you very much indeed for for this invitation for be part of this great university. And of course, I want to thank you, Carlos, the director of the Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom. Thank you, Mr. President Lasso, and Kimberly Reed, former president of Export-Import Bank of the United States, and Carlos. Thank you for the fight for democracy in Venezuela and Ecuador and Colombia. We have the same values and the same principles, I think. I think when I'm thinking about my term and my term as an Attorney General in Colombia, which is a country extremely complicated in terms of criminality, in terms of territory, we have to understand exactly that we have a lot of challenge. I remember when I took office in 2020, when the former President Duque was the president of Colombia, that we talked together, we talked about how could we extend democracy, rule of law, check and balance in Colombia. And we, at that time, we were working together, the President Duque in the executive branch. The Attorney General is elected by the Supreme Court in Colombia. So I'm part of the judicial branch, so it's different branch. It's not like the United States of America, in which the United States, the Attorney General is named by the President. In Colombia, is named by the Supreme Court. So we were working together in different ways because we have to articulate. And I think it's an extraordinary word to understand exactly what is the meaning of public service. You have to articulate, you have to work together. And you have to understand that the rule of law is the most important thing that we have. And the rule of law is protected under Constitution, under legality, under the freedom. And this is why I understood exactly what was my role. My role was investigate and prosecute criminals. So today, we have another atmosphere in Colombia. So then, the President Petro arrived to the presidency, took power, or took office in 2022. And then, I remember that I was very concerned about my position at the justice in Colombia. So I went to the presidential palace to talk to President Petro and to explain to him exactly what will be the relationship between him and the Attorney General in Colombia. And then we didn't have exactly the same principles. My principle is exactly that the justice is try to defend democracy, defend rule of law, and persecute criminals. Why? Because the state contains criminals in order to use the law. But then the government create a total peace project in which they included all kind of criminals, not only political actors like ELN groups, but non-political actors. And non-political actors are exactly traffickers and different kind of criminals in Colombia, and try to use one channel to avoid law. And that's why I didn't accept any kind of law suspension warrant, for example, in Colombia. And that creates a lot of problems between not only the President Petro and the Attorney General Barbosa, but the principles that we represent each other. He represents one principle. The principle is we can negotiate everything in Colombia, even the rule of law. And my position is the position that we have to respect only the Constitution of the country, the law, and of course protect the people that are everywhere in our country. So that's why it's not only personal thing. I think it's institutional thing. So if we protect institutions, we protect the people, we protect the legacy, and if I know if I want to answer that question, I think the people think that Attorney General Barbosa are defending the Constitution and the institution and the rule of law in Colombia, and I think the people are very, very concerning about that. So security, rule of law, freedom, free speech, free market are extremely important to develop our countries. But if you try to take them out of principles, you have a lot of problems. And now Colombia have a lot of challenges in terms of protection of human rights, of legality, of rule of law. So I think the legacy is that. The legacy is Attorney General Barbosa was a person who did what I have to do in terms of protection, the Constitution, and applying the rule of law in our country, and of course, investigate and persecute criminals in our country, which is the most important function that I have under my Constitution or the Constitution of 1991 in my country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask the same question to the President. Presidente, ¿cuál cree usted que sería su mayor legado como Presidente de la República?
En primer lugar, para mí es un gusto estar aquí en el Centro Adam Smith. Le agradezco al director Carlos Díaz Rosillo por haberme invitado a ser como uno de los profesores visitantes del programa del 2024 y compartir este escenario con el fiscal Barbosa, con la chairman Kimberly y con el embajador Vecchio es un real honor y sobre todo poder hablar frente a ustedes, estudiantes y visitantes de este programa. Yendo a la pregunta, yo partiría contándoles que para mí es un inmenso honor estar aquí, compartiendo con estos 3, 4 grandes amigos, con una gran experiencia académica. Yo les cuento que soy un ecuatoriano que nació en una familia de clase media con limitaciones económicas y que debí trabajar desde los 15 años de edad para poder estudiar en el colegio. No tuve la oportunidad.
After expressing his gratitude, he mentioned that he comes from a middle-class family in Ecuador, had to work since he was 15 years old to achieve what he has achieved. Very brief summary.
No tuve la oportunidad que ustedes tuvieron de ir a tan buenas universidades como Harvard, Georgetown, la de Nantes, la Sergio Arboleda y algunas otras prestigiosas universidades del mundo. Pero bueno, desde los 15 años aprendí lo que era la libertad. Entendí que nadie haría por uno mejor las cosas que uno mismo. Y como debía trabajar para sostener y apoyar en la familia de mis padres y luego en la propia, yo sentía el impacto de las malas decisiones de los gobiernos. Cuando me venían a decir, tú tranquilo que yo te saco de la pobreza, entendí que eso no existía, que no hay nadie que te pueda sacar de la pobreza que tú mismo.
Since he was 15, he learned about the value of liberty and realized that government's not going to take you out of poverty. Nobody better than you to pull yourself up and do things for you.
Me desarrollé en el sector privado, en el área de la banca. Y cuando llegó el momento en que dije, veo que la democracia y la libertad de mi país están amenazados, decidí dejar las actividades privadas y entrar en la política. Lo primero que dijeron de mí es que estaba loco, que quién iba a votar por un banquero, que quién iba a votar por un niño rico, quién iba a votar por un católico conservador. Finalmente, a la tercera fue la vencida y la mayoría de los ecuatorianos no votaron por un banquero, votaron por alguien que quería defender la democracia y la libertad de 17 millones de ecuatorianos que se vio amenazada con un gobierno de corte del socialismo del siglo XXI, liderado por alguien que de alguna manera se considera un semidios capaz de dirigir el destino de cada uno de los ciudadanos del Ecuador.
After many years in the banking sector, he decided to run for office, and people told him that he was crazy. Who's going to vote for a banker? And on the third try, he got the support of 17 million Ecuadorians and became president.
Cuando asumí el mando en mayo del 2021, el Ecuador, igual que el mundo, vivía una crisis sanitaria como nunca antes se había visto en la historia de la humanidad, la crisis del COVID. En segundo lugar, teníamos una grave crisis económica derivada de la pandemia. La economía había caído aproximadamente un 9% y se habían perdido empleos y la situación fiscal era muy tensa.
When he took office in May of 2021, he took office in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and the country was in a severe economic crisis at the time.
Teníamos una crisis moral también.
He also had a moral crisis,
Problemas muy severos de corrupción.
corruption,
Y teníamos problemas también en el campo de lo social, con
Social
altos
problems.
niveles de pobreza y sobre todo con un abandono casi total a los niños que sufrían de desnutrición crónica e infantil en mi país.
high levels of poverty and child malnutrition.
Debimos comenzar con el COVID. En apenas 100 días cumplí una promesa de campaña que era vacunar al 53% de la población con 2 dosis, que era la mayoría de los adultos en el Ecuador. Para aquello, el objetivo era muy claro y para aquello debíamos llevar a cabo una diplomacia de las vacunas, porque en mayo del 2021 todavía había una escasez mundial de vacunas y había que tratar en este caso no solo con nuestros buenos aliados, los Estados Unidos, que nos donaron un buen número de vacunas, sino también hablar con la China, que era un gran productor de vacunas que funcionaron en todo el mundo y particularmente en el Ecuador.
So of all the issues he talked about, he began with the COVID crisis and is proud that within the first 100 days of his government, he was able to vaccinate 53% of the population with 2 doses. And he counted on the help of his country's good friend, the United States. But he also had to go to China because they were producing vaccines that his people needed.
Creo que ahí está el primer legado de mi gobierno,
That's his first legacy.
haber defendido la vida de 17 millones de ecuatorianos.
Protect the life of 17 million Ecuadorians.
En un instante, concretamente, el 16 o 15 de julio del 21 y el 17 de agosto del 21, el Ecuador ocupó el primer lugar en el mundo de nivel de vacunación cada mil habitantes. Realmente fue algo muy estimulante porque vimos recuperar la esperanza en la vida de la mayoría de los ecuatorianos.
So within the first couple of months of him being in power, Ecuador achieved #1 in terms of per capita vaccinations.
Algunos colegas de la región me llamaban a preguntar qué hiciste, porque yo tomé el país en una posición en niveles muy bajos de récord de vacunación. Lo segundo, la crisis
So his
económica.
colleagues would call him and say, how are you doing it?
Lo segundo, la crisis económica. Recibir un país con un déficit fiscal de aproximadamente 8% del Producto Interno Bruto, con una economía que había caído cerca del 9.8% y la pérdida de empleo para más de 500,000 ecuatorianos era algo realmente desafiante.
So the second challenge was the economic crisis that the country was facing, unemployment.
En el
Deficits.
2021 la economía creció más del 10% y logramos recuperar el terreno perdido en el año 2020 de la pandemia. En el 2022 crecimos cerca del 7% y en el 2023 estimamos el crecimiento en aproximadamente 3%. La recuperación de empleo fue cercano a los 420,000 empleos adecuados, más la reactivación de lo que es la microempresa y el trabajo de la base de la pirámide laboral del Ecuador.
So growth rates were over 10% in 2021, followed by 7%, followed by 3%. So taking the country out of the economic crisis is the second legacy.
Del 8% de déficit en el año 2020 al 2021 ya estábamos en cerca de 4.2%, en el 2022 en 2%, y el 2023 tuvimos problemas con el invierno, la ruptura del oleoducto y esa tendencia a la baja del déficit se interrumpió para cerrar mi mandato con cerca del 3,5% de déficit fiscal.
So the deficit went from 8% to 4% to 2%, and right before he left, went up again to 3%.
Y es un gran desafío resolver estos problemas de la macroeconomía cuando hay muchos servicios públicos en educación, en salud, en seguridad, que requieren una mayor inversión del Estado. Y tuvimos que actuar, en primer lugar, con absoluta y total honestidad, más allá de lo que quieran decir mis detractores. Fue un gobierno realmente honesto que nos permitió recuperar recursos como cuando uno navega con el viento en el mar y uno recibe una brisa fresca y no sabe de dónde viene exactamente, pero recuperamos recursos con un esfuerzo muy grande de lucha contra la corrupción y eso nos permitió llevar a cabo o incrementar programas de beneficio social como la lucha contra la desnutrición crónica infantil, que es un importante legado que se le reconocerá a mi gobierno en el tiempo porque asumió un país con un 24% de desnutrición crónica infantil y al cabo de 2 años y medio de gobierno, con el aval de los organismos multilaterales de la ONU, la UNICEF, entregamos el país con una reducción de cerca de 4 puntos porcentuales, es decir, bajó a 20% la desnutrición crónica infantil y yo me he comprometido con los ecuatorianos a que dedicaré el último día de mi vida a la lucha contra la desnutrición crónica infantil desde el pensamiento y la gestión privada, porque se trata del futuro del país, se trata de los niños y se trata de lucha contra la pobreza.
Cutting government deficits when there's so many social problems is really, really hard because government needs to spend on these issues. And he highlighted chronic child malnutrition, which is one of his biggest achievements, taking it from 24% to 20%. And he said he's going to fight for the rest of his life to improve that issue.
Tengo algunos otros temas que puedo comentar bajo el título de ¿qué legado dejó mi gobierno? Lo voy a guardar para las clases que tendré en el futuro, pero solo concluyo diciéndoles que mi gobierno en 30 meses desarrolló la agenda medioambiental más agresiva de la historia del Ecuador, o por lo menos de los últimos 43 años de retorno a la democracia. Llevamos a cabo un canje de deuda por conservación de las Islas Galápagos por un monto de 1.630 millones de dólares, que es la cifra más alta en la historia de la humanidad. Y pudimos reducir nuestra deuda pública externa en cerca de 1.100 millones de dólares y conseguir recursos por cerca de 450 millones de dólares para programas comunitarios de conservación de las Islas Galápagos. Nuevamente, gracias por esta invitación, Carlos.
There are many other parts of his legacy that he'll discuss in his study groups, but he wants to conclude by highlighting his aggressive environmental record, not just in the country in general, but in the Galapagos in particular. So for those of you who are students, he'll spend quite a bit of his time talking about that environmental legacy in his study group. Chairman, before I ask you a question, I want to tell you a story. We haven't talked about this. And this is about the value and the importance of good leadership in the government. I got to serve in the administration along with her. I was in the White House when you were named, when you were nominated by the president. But we never got to work together. I did not have jurisdiction over anything related to the bank. So we never met. But a few months ago, I was having a very nice dinner in Paris at a conference, and I'm seated next to a public servant from the bank. And we're talking about, I assume that when there's a public servant from the US government, I always assume it's a Democrat, because the vast majority are Democrats. And when I mention Trump, the conversation typically ends a few minutes after. And we were talking about the government, and this public servant was very intrigued about what we do at the center. So I'm telling him about the senior leadership program and how we bring public servants, and how great it will be to have public servants from the US government, because we've had a lot from Latin America, and I really want to make sure we have a lot more Americans. And he mentioned, why didn't you ask Kimberly Reed? And anyway, this is somebody who worked for her, a public servant. And I said, I would love to, but I actually don't know how to get a hold of her. And so for the next 20 minutes or so, he was just singing your praises, what a great leader you are. And this was in front of the current chairman of the bank. And so in a very open way, talked about your leadership, how open you were. And it's really rare to see a civil servant praise a Trump administration official in the way that he did. So it's a testament to your leadership and to your quality as a manager, as a leader. So let me ask you about the bank. The US has dozens and dozens of government agencies that are critical to our mission as a nation. The bank is one of those agencies, but not a whole lot of people know about what the bank does. What does the bank do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carlos. And I want to thank the Attorney General and the President and the Ambassador. I am just blown away by what FIU has done here, and the values and the principles that you're teaching all of the students at the undergraduate and graduate level. What an honor to join in this program. And that wonderful person that you're talking about, I'm going to out him right now. His name is Jim Burrows, and he was our head of something that I love so much about the Export-Import Bank. He was the head of our small business division, and I believe he's the acting chief banking officer right now.
Which is a political position.
But
he's
not.
Career, but he's a career, which is rare.
And so I don't know how many of you know what the Export-Import Bank is, but I will be at the White House on February 12th with my successor and my predecessor, celebrating the 90th anniversary of this federal agency. It was created during the Depression in 1934, and it's evolved from then until now to do what I think was the best job I could ever have, help the world buy American. And so what the Export-Import Bank does is provide financing to a foreign buyer when they want to buy a made-in-the-USA good or service, and they can't get the financing from a normal private sector bank, or that private sector bank needs the full faith and credit of the United States to guarantee that loan, to be able to buy that good or service. And that happens all around the world. Very important countries. And I know I did, during COVID, I was leading this agency, but I did a webinar with President Duque, and I also went down to Brazil and did a big event with President Bolsonaro. And we want the world buying American. And so it gives that important financing. Is it a Boeing plane that you're going to buy instead of a French-made Airbus plane or a Chinese-made plane? Is it going to be engines? Is it going to be healthcare equipment? Or one of the favorite things that I did during my tenure, we helped the Trade Bank of Iraq by guaranteeing a $450 million loan that JP Morgan was making so they could buy US wheat and rice. And just so many different things. What you don't see that is not big and splashy, but is important to what America does that Jim Burrows led, was helping 80% of what Exim does is small business and helping the world buy those beautiful things. I was right here in Miami visiting a towel company, for example, that wanted to export its towels to Caribbean islands. And it didn't need a loan or a loan guaranteed. It needed export credit insurance. So that's another product that Exim has to help the world buy American. But there's a long story, and I'll summarize it quickly. The bank had essentially been shut for 4 years because free market purists believe that that's not the role of government. And President Trump, when he was running for office, agreed with that. And then he came into the Oval Office and he met with business leaders. And they said, our clock is getting cleaned because other countries have export-import banks now. And China has 2 official and many unofficial avenues of Exim financing. It's also known as debt trap diplomacy that we don't want to see Latin America buying into. We want Latin America and the Caribbean to buy US goods and services instead of Chinese. And President Trump woke up and said, you know what? I'm going to reopen this bank that has essentially been shut for 4 years, and nominated me. And it just made me so happy to go and restart this very crucial, important agency, strong bipartisan support. And I think the world is better off because of that.
Just a follow-up question, because I believe that the biggest threat we face as a nation is without a doubt China. From your perspective at the bank, how concerned should Americans be about what the Chinese are doing around the world?
They should be very concerned. The Belt and Road Initiative has helped China build footholds all around the world. And it might not be just for an economic reason. It could be for a national security reason. So I had the Prime Minister of Greece make sure I saw the port of Piraeus in Greece, all Chinese shipping. We know that the port in Djibouti in Africa, China did lending. The lending didn't get paid off, and so China acquired the assets. Same thing in Sri Lanka. But we also see it touching our borders as well. And the world knows that the United States makes the highest quality, best goods and services that there are. And the United States also wants to protect American taxpayers. So if we're going to make a loan, people like Jim Burrows, his team, they do good underwriting to ensure that we get paid back with interest and fees. It's about supporting American business. My favorite deal that I did when I was at Exim, we'd been shut for 4 years, and the country of Mozambique was talking to Russia and China to help them tap some energy LNG reserves off their coast that would transform the country. And as soon as we got reopened, they came to us and they said, we want to buy American-made from a company called Air Products International in Pennsylvania. We want to buy American equipment to help us. And it was the largest deal at the time, $5 billion of equipment. And I came down to Port Manatee, Florida, and actually touched that LNG exchange equipment that looks like a big, I guess, spaceship, I would say, some big, huge, massive thing that workers build in our country. And I watched what was going to be put on a ship and sent to Mozambique. And we displaced China and Russia, and we'll see where that takes that country. But I also was pleased to help the LNG business in the United States, industry in the United States, figure out how they could get their wonderful energy product, which is the strength of America, to market and export. And I won't be political here, but what happened very recently with the current administration to take away LNG, not only from the world, but from our partners and allies in Europe, it's horrible. And I hope that that is reversed.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, we've known each other for many years. I got to see you firsthand represent a very, very difficult situation, right? You were an ambassador, initially an ambassador without an embassy. You had to physically take over the embassy, and I'm sure in your study group, you're gonna talk about how you physically take possession of an embassy. I got to see how you represented the government of Venezuela in front of the administration. Recently, the current administration made some deals with the dictatorship in exchange of a promise that we just saw that was broken, right? The leading presidential candidate is not able to run, right? Which calls into question how legitimate the elections will be. Your thoughts on no?
Tough question.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. Carlos, Atilda, I don't know if Atilda is around here, from the center, Adam Smith Center. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share our ideas and our experience while I was ambassador. I want to thank President Lasso. Before becoming president, he was supporting Venezuela. During his presidency, he did it, and I do not have any doubt that he will continue supporting Venezuelans in our quest for freedom. Attorney General Barbosa, thank you so much. We cannot take democracy for granted. At the end of the day, institutions are made by people like you. That's what you are defending, institutions. Something that we lost in Venezuela, and in part is because the problem that we are facing right now. And dear Kimberly, we just met. It's an honor being with you today. Carlos, as you said, you know that, just to give you a context, I was the only ambassador in DC with 2 orders of arrests. Now I have 4, no? For political reasons, obviously. Without embassy. The embassy was occupied, illegally occupied, by people funded by the Maduro regime. I didn't have staffers. I didn't have resources. And they gave me like a key. This is your car. Now you are an ambassador. And I was looking around, without nothing. So it was very challenging. Carlos, you know that better than me. And we had a lot of challenges ahead. And I would say, and this is part of what I will discuss in my class, is how you can build an agenda in this context. How you can build also a bipartisan support in Washington, knowing the actors, the institutions, how you can just bring all these people together to support a democratic transition in Venezuela. And also I had crisis, political crisis. For example, keeping that bipartisan support in the middle of an impeachment announced by Speaker Pelosi against President Trump. It wasn't that easy. How to put Juan Guaidó, the interim president, inside of the State of the Union address secretly. Things like that. And also how we can just recover our embassy. And I will tell that story in my class.
Which you did.
Yeah, I did it. But it was beautiful what we did, and I feel so proud. If I need to think about a legacy, I will say that I will never give up my fight for freedom in Venezuela. We tried. We were very close, but we will try it again until we achieve freedom. And that's the best legacy that we can just show to the people, to our people. Because at the end of the day, Carlos, we were not defending only Venezuelan rights. We are defending, I think you mentioned that, Kimberly, we are defending universal principles and values set forth by the U.S. founding fathers. That's the reality. That's what we are defending. That's why we are together. So going back to your question, we need to understand the real nature of the regime. If not, we will fail again. We are not dealing with a classical dictatorship. We are dealing with a criminal organization in power. That's one point. Second, it's not possible to resolve this only by Venezuelans. We are not confronting Maduro. We are confronting the ELN, FARC, China, Russia, Iran. That's what we are confronting. So having that into account will help us to define clearly the tools that we have available in order to force Maduro for a political transition. And it's a combination of things. Sanctions are not silver bullets. They are not silver bullets. It's only one tool that we can use together, jointly with other tools, to force for a political transition in Venezuela. So, in my view, I mean, we are where we are right now because we haven't understood what I just said. Having this clear will be easier for us to design a clear path to Venezuela. So far, the months that we have ahead, we have decided to participate in a potential presidential election. I call it political event. It's not an election because we are in the middle of a dictatorship. But we need to use that event, political event, to organize, mobilize, and spread our messages in a safety manner. In a safety manner. And we will use it to create a new political momentum in Venezuela. So the international community need to support what's going on in Venezuela right now. There is no foreign policy without internal policy. And this is our policy and our strategy, knowing what we are facing in Venezuela. And that's why we need to get the support of the international community, how we can work together from abroad with our main allies to force Maduro for a better condition to have this potential election at the end of the year. And that's what we need, Carlos, from the international community. And last message. I have heard that, the crisis in Venezuela and the refugee crisis mainly, not the humanitarian crisis, the refugee crisis is due to the sanctions. That is not true. This is a man-made disaster created by Maduro. That's the root cause of the migration in Venezuela. If we would like to resolve that issue, migration, the crisis in the region, including the conflict that we have in the border with Mexico and the United States, we need to have a democratic transition in our country. It's the only way to resolve it. It's the only way. Putting resources in the hands of Maduro won't resolve the crisis. Will go to the kleptocracy, to corruption, but never to the people, and will give more resources to Maduro to preserve the power and to repress the people of Venezuela. We need to understand that clearly.
Mr. Ambassador, let me ask you that, because that is exactly what the administration is doing. So was the administration duped, or do you think it was an ideological decision intended to support a leftist regime?
I don't think so. This is about ideology.
You don't think it is, no?
No, because this is a
So
fight between democracy and dictatorship. There is no ideology here. If you defend freedom, if you defend democracy, you have to be on our side. And you have to be against Maduro. Probably you will have people inside of the administration thinking that if we resolve the economic issues of Maduro, people will be better and they won't leave Venezuela. Facts, tell you that is totally different. In October, we have 40,000 Venezuelans crossing the border with Mexico. In November was similar. I haven't seen the number of December. They haven't published that. So they haven't resolved that issue. So lifting sanctions has not stopped the migration problem. So we need to think more smarter on this. And the administration should understand that the only way is, in this case, having a free and fair election soon.
Thank you. I'll go back to the chairman. This is a more a generic question, but it gets to what I know you're going to be discussing in your study groups. Politics has a bad name. Often, part of what we want to do at the center is inspire students to enter into public service and realize that you can do a lot of good as a public servant. You have been in the private sector, you have been in the public sector. If one of your students asks you, why should you become a public servant? What would you tell them?
I was so honored to meet the students today, and some are in the audience. Thank you for coming. Our class is going to focus on leadership and success stories in the United States. And so today I brought in an example, Manny Iglesias, who also is with us. He lives here in Miami, and he was born in Cuba. And his family fled the Saturday after the Bay of Pigs. And he shared his story that then touched upon coming to the United States with nothing, working hard, getting an education, and being involved in business. He's a lawyer, but then seeing the importance of public service. You can make a lot of money in the United States if you work hard and things happen in certain ways. But how do you really make a difference in the country to ensure that everyone has that right? You serve your country. And it can be at the local level, state level, national level. I know we have a former Congresswoman Sanchez here. I was a young lawyer on the Hill when she was in Congress doing that. And you did that. And everyone who's here has done that. You have to ensure you have a free and fair system. And I am really scared right now as an American of what's happening in our country. And I just see this movement towards socialism with this recent demonization of what our founders created that is such a blessing. And I know so many people in Latin America who are coming here understand and appreciate. But you have to give, and it's such a privilege to give. And it's inspiring to work with people like Jim Burrows, who dedicate their whole lives to making our country great. And so I just want to recommend it to everyone. It's hard work. You know, it was 24/7 for me. And when you come in as a political appointee, your job is to implement the policies of the President of the United States. Also, as a former legislative branch person, you better uphold the laws that our Congress creates. And I know that we have judges and important people in our court system to ensure our judicial branch is at check as well. But I hope that the United States still serves as a model for every country in the world. And I think showing economic prosperity equals freedom is a key tenet. And I know that's why the center was created.
Thank you. Mr. President, Ecuador, like a few other Latin American countries, I can think of Peru, for example, is a country. No, te lo voy a decir ahora en español. Is a country where it is not uncommon for presidents not to finish their terms. There's quite a few presidents who don't complete their terms. It must be exceptionally hard for an ambitious man who runs for president 3 times, who achieves the highest office, to give that up and to resign. Why did you do it? Walk us through the process. El Ecuador, como otros países de la América Latina, pienso en el Perú, por ejemplo, son países en los cuales es muy común que los presidentes no terminen su periodo. En otros no pasa, en Colombia no sucede, en México no sucede, pero en el Ecuador sucede con mucha frecuencia. Debe ser muy difícil para un hombre con ambición que llegó a ocupar el cargo más importante del país, la presidencia de la República, tomar la decisión de dejar el poder. ¿Lo puede compartir cómo fue esa decisión, por qué la tomó y qué piensa hoy, 2 meses después de dejar el Palacio de Carondelet, sobre esa decisión que tomó?
Bien, desde el primer día de gobierno tuve a una mayoría en la Asamblea Nacional que buscaba la destitución del presidente de la República, sin importar el costo que esto implicaba para el país.
The first day he had majorities in the Congress who wanted to get rid of him without caring about the impact on the country.
Y no era una discusión ideológica, no era solamente el socialismo del siglo XXI, sino también un partido de derecha, que junto con el socialismo del siglo XXI quería la destitución de mi gobierno.
It wasn't just ideological, not just the socialists, but also parties on the right wanted to get rid of him.
Y bueno, durante los 2 primeros años de gobierno, 24 meses, tuve 4 intentos de destitución. Y muchos de ellos apoyados por movimientos en las calles, movimientos que no se justificaban porque el gobierno no había tomado ninguna decisión que afectara a la economía populares.
4 times the assembly wanted to get rid of him, or tried to get rid of him.
Tuve 5 revocatorias de mandato. Es decir, yo tenía que, por la mano derecha, gestionar el gobierno, lograr la construcción de escuelas, hospitales, viviendas, la agenda ambiental, la vacunación, etc. Y con la mano izquierda tratar de defenderme de todos estos intentos populistas de destitución en la Asamblea Nacional.
5 votes for destitution. On the right hand, he had to do all sorts of social programs. On the left hand, he had to sort of keep them at bay.
El cuarto intento se trató de un juicio político falso. Un juicio político falso que lamentablemente fue admitido por la Corte Constitucional.
Fourth attempt was on a false impeachment that was allowed by the Supreme Court.
Se me estaba juzgando por 2 actos sucedidos en el gobierno anterior al mío.
He was being judged for 2 acts that took place in the government prior to his,
3 años antes de que yo fuera presidente.
3 years before he became president.
Llegó el momento en que me tocó mi defensa en la Asamblea Nacional, fui a hacerlo y claro, no solo me defendí, sino les dije que no quería creer que yo estaba ahí por ser el presidente que más droga había incautado en la historia del Ecuador.
He went before the assembly and defended himself and said that he hoped he's not there because he confiscated more drugs than any other president in the history of the country.
Que no creía que yo estaba en esa situación por haber luchado con al menos 5 mafias de la corrupción, asaltos a la seguridad social de la policía, asaltos a una empresa de seguros estatal, tráfico de droga, minería ilegal y algunos otros problemas más que todavía existen en la sociedad ecuatoriana.
Fought against illegal mining, drug trafficking, and many other problems that are still part of Ecuadorian society.
Pero la reflexión íntima, personal que hice fue por encima de mi interés de mantenerme en el poder, está el futuro del Ecuador y de los ecuatorianos.
He said to himself, above staying in power, it's the future of all Ecuadorians.
Y esa es la diferencia con aquellos políticos que se aferran al poder a cualquier costo, aunque sea destruir a su país y destruir el futuro de los
That's the
ciudadanos.
difference with all other politicians who hold on to power regardless of the consequences.
El ministro de Gobierno me decía, presidente, tenemos los votos en contra del juicio político suficientes. Y le dije, mira, no, esto no es cuestión de contabilizar votos, es que van a intentarlo una 5ª vez. Ya la economía está sufriendo, tenemos problemas en servicios públicos derivados de esta inestabilidad. Para mí lo primero es el Ecuador y los ecuatorianos.
His minister of government told him that they had the votes to survive the impeachment, and he said, this is not about counting votes. This is about the future of the country.
Y bueno, en la profunda intimidad con mi conciencia, tomé una decisión que fue sorpresiva hasta para mis detractores, porque a las 7 de la noche del 16 o 17 de mayo de este año, resolví disolver la Asamblea Nacional amparado en un artículo de la Constitución. Y aquí quiero remarcar que es muy distinto al caso del Perú. En el Perú no existe la facultad para que el presidente disuelva la Asamblea. En el Ecuador sí existe, coloquialmente se llama muerte cruzada, porque hay que convocar elecciones de manera inmediata, como sucedió, y llevar a cabo un proceso de transición democrática como orgullosamente quedará para la historia del Ecuador.
So at 7 p.m. on the 16th of May, he took a decision that is part of the Constitution, which is to dissolve the National Assembly, something that is in the Constitution, unlike the Peruvian case. So he made that decision to dissolve them and call them for election.
Lo anuncié en una cadena de televisión a las 7 de la mañana de un día miércoles y claro, como todo se filtra en política, había grabado la cadena a las 3, 4 de la mañana de ese mismo día y ya algunos actores de la oposición querían hablar conmigo para que detenga el proceso y le dije no se puede creer en gente que no es confiable por encima de decisiones o de intereses personales o políticos. está el interés del país, del Ecuador. Y esto me lleva a decir que en algún modo yo me defino como un gestor público. No soy un político tradicionalmente definido como aquella persona que nació para detentar el poder, vive para alcanzar el poder y una vez que lo alcanza, muere ahí abrazado, aunque destruya a su país. Para mí puse por delante el interés de los ecuatorianos por el interés personal y llevé a cabo un proceso de transición nítido, de acuerdo con la Constitución, de acuerdo con la ley, y hoy en el Ecuador hay un gobierno democráticamente electo para cumplir el periodo presidencial que me correspondía a mí.
His decisions surprised everybody, including his detractors, and it was made public on TV at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday, but he had taped it at 3 a.m. that same day, but it had leaked, and so immediately he had people from the opposition reach out to him to negotiate, but he said that there was no negotiation because the country comes first, and he had made the decision already, and today there is a democratically elected government that was elected to finish his term.
Esa es la historia, es la primera vez que en mi país se disuelve la asamblea constitucionalmente.
First time in the history of the country that constitutionally the assembly is dissolved.
Y un gobierno democrático es sustituido por otro gobierno que nace de la voluntad popular.
And a democratically elected government is succeeded by another democratically elected government as a result of that call for election. ¿Fue la
Bien.
decisión correcta o se arrepiente?
No, no me arrepiento, es la decisión correcta,
the right
la volvería a tomar si se repiten las mismas circunstancias y creo que este es parte del legado que dejaré a la historia del Ecuador, un presidente democrático que hizo pesar más el interés común de la sociedad ecuatoriana por encima de su interés personal o político.
El poder seduce y se extraña. ¿Qué extraña más del poder? What do you miss most about power?
Lo que más extraño del poder es seguir sirviendo a los ecuatorianos. Realmente, como me defino como un presidente gestor más que un netamente político, pues luchar contra la desnutrición crónica es algo estimulante. Poder salvar a tantos niños recuperando su futuro, el poder dar vivienda gratuita a más de 8,000 familias ecuatorianas, el haber construido en 30 meses más de 29 unidades educativas, construir 4 hospitales, equipar otros, recuperar centros de salud para adaptarlos al programa de lucha contra la desnutrición crónica. Sí tuve un problema muy serio que lo vive en mi país desde hace muchos años, que son los problemas de inseguridad. Y lastimosamente hemos llegado a un punto en que un caso que ya es público, presentado por la Fiscalía, demuestra la penosa vinculación entre las mafias y algunos sectores políticos en el país, cosa que produce una bomba que explosiona y causa mucho daño a la sociedad ecuatoriana. Gracias.
What he misses the most is serving the people. He highlighted what he mentioned before, child malnutrition, free housing, healthcare, and is now talking about security, the big issue that Ecuador has with security.
Gracias al apoyo de Estados Unidos, con quien tenemos una relación histórica muy cercana, logramos suscribir acuerdos y convenios en materia de seguridad que hoy están siendo muy útiles para el gobierno actual, de lo cual a mí personalmente me satisface el poder haber llevado a cabo esos memorándum de entendimientos y convenios para fortalecer la capacidad de la fuerza pública del Ecuador. No es poco lo que recibimos, es realmente mucho. Llegamos a suscribir un memorándum de entendimiento entre la Secretaría de Defensa de Estados Unidos y el Ministerio de Defensa del Ecuador, un memorándum de entendimiento de mediano plazo con metas muy concretas y cuya valoración, según los expertos, llega a cerca de $3.500 millones. algo muy parecido a lo que fue el Plan Colombia, con unos montos y dimensiones obviamente adaptadas al tamaño de nuestro país. Y también convenios que permiten la interceptación de aviones con droga, con el apoyo de la Fuerza Aérea de Estados Unidos y también con el apoyo de la Marina de Estados Unidos para poder interceptar barcos en aguas, en el límite de las aguas del Ecuador, territoriales del Ecuador, y poder capturar a los traficantes de droga. Yo en esto quiero remarcar.
He's highlighting the importance of U.S. help to Ecuador. Very proud of the work he did with the U.S. and highlighted a number of MOUs, including one with DOD, between DOD and the Ministry of Defense, with the cooperation of the Air Force and the Navy for drug interdiction.
Y lo que quiero remarcar es lo que ya he mencionado. En la historia del Ecuador, y sobre todo en la historia reciente de los últimos 40 años o 20 años, en gobierno democrático logramos incautar la mayor cantidad de drogas, cerca de 580 toneladas de droga. Ese fue un golpe muy duro en el bolsillo de las mafias, que ahora por un sonado caso presentado por la Fiscalía, vemos claramente la vinculación de esas mafias con aquellos que se oponían políticamente en la Asamblea Nacional.
His government confiscated more drugs, illegal drugs, than any other government in the history of the country.
Y bueno, si usted me pregunta, ¿lo volvería a hacer? Sí, sin duda alguna, lo volvería a hacer. Es una responsabilidad con la sociedad ecuatoriana, porque el Ecuador pasó de ser un país de tráfico de drogas también a un país de consumo de drogas, y eso destruye a los jóvenes, a los niños. El duro golpe que le dimos a las mafias en términos de valor de mercado de esa droga incautada llegó a cerca de 25.000 millones de dólares. Y ahora, por las conversaciones descubiertas por la Fiscalía, tanto entre mafiosos como estos políticos con influencia en la Asamblea Nacional, declaraban que el gobierno de Lasso era un gobierno que representaba un obstáculo para sus negocios y que había que derribarlo. Y espérate que va a suceder en una semana más, espérate que tal día sucede, y se ve claramente la vinculación de las mafias de las drogas que generaban y que generan violencia en el Ecuador, todavía lo siguen haciendo, y grupos políticos que sin duda alguna actúan desde la Asamblea Nacional con una clara intención de traicionar el interés común de los ecuatorianos.
Very concerned about the drug cartels and the relationship between some politicians and the drug cartels, and said that when asked if he would do it again, he would absolutely do it again. Y concluyo con otra pregunta. ¿Vamos a ver una cuarta campaña de la presidencia en un futuro? Will he run again for office?
Eso está por verse, pero realmente hay que preguntarle a mi esposa, María Lourdes.
Ok. ¿Quiere decir que sí? No.
No.
Embajador, Ambassador, a concluding question about the upcoming elections, quote-unquote elections. You mentioned the importance of the international community, that this is not something that could be done only by Venezuelans, but the international community needs to help. In particular, what can the international community do to make sure that there are free and fair elections in Venezuela?
First of all, as I said, without pressure, Maduro won't allow to have free and fair election in Venezuela. So we need to understand, as I said, the real nature of the regime, and that with pressure, you can just achieve that objective. We have to include not only the United States, but also countries from Latin America and Europe, working together toward the same objective. Second, the presence of international observers, such as, for example, the European Union. I would say the OAS, they are necessary to be in the ground with enough time in order to check all the details of those conditions. Free media and stop repression, because I mean, how you can do campaign if they put people behind bar. So I think these are the most important conditions that we need in order to have free and fair elections, but understanding that we need the pressure from the international community jointly with the intern pressure inside of Venezuela.
And in your opinion, will there be free and fair elections?
So far, no. But again, I think we need to use that political event to create a new momentum, because politics is not static, it's dynamic, it moves, and you need to shake it sometimes. And I think this is a great momentum for that. And the importance of this election or political event is that we need to understand that, and that's why I'm very optimistic on this. More than 80% of the Venezuelans, they want to change in my country. They are just looking for the opportunity. And also, I see a division between what we call Chavismo and Maduro. And we need to exacerbate that as well and create that momentum. And I think that's where we are right now.
I want to conclude with a question to the Attorney General, and then we're going to open it up for questions to the audience. Mr. Attorney General, those of us who believe that democracy is not only the best, but really the only way to organize our political systems, are very concerned about some of the developments in Colombia, some of the steps that President Petro has been taking as president. Is he a threat to democracy?
I'm not the former Attorney General. So, no, I think we have a lot of challenge under the Petro administration, and one of them is especially the protection of justice, the independence of justice. I think we have to see a lot of people to defend. Not only democracy is a broad concept, but inside democracy, we have to analyze and we have to see so far that democracy involves as well justice. But not justice, not only social justice, because social justice is one term of the justice, but as well justice is the protection of the rule of law by the judges, by the courts, but the independent of the courts, or which is I think the basis of that concept of democracy. Democracy is not only the electoral way to get the power. And I think when we were discussing, and the Ambassador Vecchio said about the situation of Venezuela, the situation of Venezuela is extremely interesting to see exactly which was the move of that regime face to the justice. Because the justice was extremely important to erode democracy in Venezuela. So I think the most important challenge in my country today is protect justice. Today, the Supreme Court is trying to elect the new Attorney General, but it takes time. So it is extremely important to let the court decide it, but at the same time, protect all the actors that involve justice: Constitutional Court, Supreme Court, Attorney General, etc. The other point, which is extremely important, is to try to keep Colombia safe in terms of security. And I think we were discussing about the same topic: Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, and whole Latin America. I was elected president of the Ibero-American Association of Prosecutors by 22 prosecutors in my attorney generals in Latin America, included Spain, Andorra, Portugal, and we have a lot of international cooperation with US, with France, and it is extremely important because in Colombia, the Attorney General is an extremely major figure under our Constitution. Why? Because I have the leading of international judicial cooperation in my country, not the president of Colombia. So as I see, in every single country, when I discuss with my colleagues, the problem, I think the big issues are security. Why? Because we have to face criminality, transnational criminality. It's not criminality, it's not national criminality as well, only. It's transnational criminality. And why transnational criminality? Because we have to investigate and prosecute people, but at the same time we have to follow the money. And the criminal assets are extremely important. So in Colombia, in my term, we seized more than $6 billion from the traffickers. So I have some enemies. But at the same time, I issued more than 100 extradition warrants to the United States. So I deliver more than 600 people from Colombia that commit crimes at the United States of America. And we fight against criminals. So security, and at the same time, protection of the justice. And if you have security and justice, and at the same time stand and protect and defend freedom, you can see so far the rule of law in a good health in our countries. And I think we have a different situation in Latin America. We can compare the situation of Argentina or Chile or Peru or El Salvador or Honduras or Guatemala, etc. But at the same time are the same elements. Even the element that you have to put together in some ways, you have to say, okay, the problem here is the justice, the problem here is the legislative branch. But at the same time, democracy is not only a concept that came from electoral things. It's a whole huge a set of things that you have to put together, included justice, freedom, and the possibility to live free, and of course to be safe. In Latin America today, the most important world in our countries is, for me today, is security and lack of justice, and of course impunity. That's the most important thing. The former president Lasso says that there's an investigation in Ecuador between the politicians and some public servants with narco traffic. I think it's the same thing in Colombia, Illegal campaigns with the support of money from trafficking, money laundering, cyber criminality, lack of security in different towns, and of course the possibility to serve the country in a way in which I think I serve. When I arrived to the Attorney General office, the city center, Bogota, was the center and the whole point of the justice in my country. So I say it is impossible to be Attorney General of Colombia staying all time in Bogota. So I went to different territories. I went to little towns. I arrived and I discovered that the Attorney General was in 485 little towns. Colombia is composed by 1,100 little towns. So less than 50% of the country has the Attorney General office presence. So what was my goal? My goal was spread justice in my country. In 10 days' time, today, we have now the Attorney General office presence in 750 municipalities. More budget? No. Only articulate. Articulate how? Take the possibility to talk to every single mayor of the different towns and said, we have to help you to stay there, to send a prosecutor, to send some people, students, law students, who want to serve the Attorney General freely. And of course, to give them the possibility to know them the word justice. And today, and it's incredible because we have a 30 years history of the Attorney General created under the Constitution of 1991. Today, I stay in Colombia and I can walk in Colombia, and the people, the citizens, said, thank you very much, Attorney General, because we know two words: institutionality and justice. And I think is the best thing. So the question was extremely complicated, but I think the answer is the big challenge is protect justice in Colombia. It's the only way to protect democracy for the future to my country. And we have to fight. And I will fight. Because I don't have a lot of countries. I have one country, my country, Colombia. So we have to decide to continue to protect, even if I have to leave my office, and we have to think in the next 2 years to try to go back to the light, because we have a difficult nightmare today in my country. And I publicly said that every single day in Colombia, without hesitation and without any kind of fear. I have some threats of my life from ELN, from traffickers, etc., etc., etc. But I joined the President Lasso. When we serve our country, when we serve the citizens, we are no doubt. We have to fight. And Colombia is a cornerstone of the countries, of Latin American countries. It's the bridge between Central America and South America. It's an extremely important country. It's 1 million, it has 1,100,000 kilometers square, 2 oceans, 32 regions, more than 50 million people. And of course, it's extremely important partnership of the United States of America, and it's extremely important partnership of every single country in the region. That's why I serve as a president of an association of Ibero-American Association of Attorneys. So I support different attorneys as well in our region. So the answer, and of course a little comment about my country and the justice of my country. Thank you, Carlos.
And when you become the former Attorney General, you'll be able to say a few things that you can't say now. All right, so we have a few minutes for Q&A. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. We can't get to all of them, but we'll try. And if the answers are brief, there'll be more questions. So ask away. I'll ask you to raise your hand, tell us your name, who you are, where you're from, and remember that questions end in a question mark, not in an exclamation point. And let me begin with the students first. So, yes.
Hi, good afternoon.
Get a microphone so that the cameras can capture it. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sebastian. I'm from Ecuador, and my question goes for President Lasso. Do I want to, my question in English or in
Ask
Spanish?
it in English and then translate it in Spanish.
Okay. Mi pregunta va para usted. Bueno, con un déficit de $5,000 millones que recibió el nuevo gobierno, ¿cuál cree usted que debe ser la cosa más importante del gobierno actual para enfrentar este desafío económico que le viene? Sabemos que en el mes de enero no le van a poder pagar a los empleados públicos a tiempo y bueno, en inglés, well, my question is, with a fiscal deficit of $5 billion, the challenges that faces the new government is really hard. What do you think is the most important thing that Ecuador needs to do now to face those challenges?
Hay que partir sobre...
¿Funcionó? ¿Está prendido? Está prendido, sí.
Hay que partir sobre la base de que los problemas de seguridad en los últimos 2 meses se han agravado. Y siendo esta la realidad, es comprensible que se busque el apoyo de la población para poder superar los problemas del déficit fiscal. Esa es una cifra que tú señalas que todavía no está confirmada, porque las cuentas nacionales se terminan de contabilizar o ejecutar hasta el mes de marzo de cada año. Mi gobierno hasta noviembre del 23 dejó un déficit equivalente al 3% del Producto Interno Bruto, cerca de $4.000 millones aproximadamente. Recuerda que yo recibí un país con más de $8.000 millones de déficit fiscal. Y hemos tenido que enfrentar esa realidad, sobre todo un país que no tiene acceso a los mercados financieros, que su única fuente de financiamiento son los organismos multilaterales. Mi gobierno debió pagar más de $5.000 millones de deuda que no correspondía a mi ejercicio de gobierno, sino a gobiernos anteriores. Sobre todo un compromiso de una ley que nació una semana antes de que yo sea presidente, la Ley de Defensa de la Dolarización, que establecía un calendario de pago de aquellos recursos que fueron tomados por un gobierno que no comprendía que la reserva monetaria no es de propiedad del gobierno, sino de la sociedad en su conjunto. Pagué más de $2.000 millones. Así que la situación fiscal no es tan distinta a lo que ha sido a lo largo de los últimos 40 años en el Ecuador. Hay un déficit estructural que en alguna medida la sociedad se resiste a tratarlo y a solucionarlo, y pienso que ese es el gran desafío que tiene el gobierno actual, enfrentar esta realidad.
So the security situation has gotten worse over the past 2 months, so it's normal to take measures to increase popularity. The situation that he inherited and that the current president inherited are not that different. He took issue with your numbers. It might not be $5 billion, but perhaps $4 billion because the books don't close until March, so they're still being counted. He inherited an $8 billion deficit, and by the time he left, it was about 3. And so
3%.
3% of the GNP. And so it's not clear what the numbers are, but deficits have been common in Ecuador for the past 40-some years. So challenging, but not unusual. Yes, let's go right here.
So my question is for Attorney General. I am from I am Marcos from Colombia, student from UM. I think my question, Ambassador was talking about the collapse of institutions. That's very important. Basically, Chavez was able to put his cronies in every institution in Venezuela. So my question to you is, Colombian institutions, can they survive this presidency of Petro? Is there a future? Because, I mean, it's not only he's trying to put someone he likes in the office of the Attorney General, he's trying to put everyone he likes all across the Colombian state, which we know because of scholarly literature is full of extractive institutions, not very independent. So I don't know, what is your takeaway from that?
Well, I don't know. I think we hope. We hope that the institutions could survive. But at the same time, we have a great dangers around institutions. And that's why I talked about justice. Why? Because you have to avoid that someone tried to pack the Constitutional Court or to pack the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court, or the different kind of different independent institutions of the justice. Why? Because at the same time, the Constitutional Court control the government and control the executive. If we have a strong legislative power, we have the possibility to stop and to avoid the erosion of the institutions in our country. So that's why my function at the same time, because the Attorney General office is extremely important to persecute people. If you control the justice, if you act equally and, of course, according with the principles to the principles of the Constitution, you cannot any kind of problems about one or another government. But if you start to lose the fight to protect that institutions and some acts start to erode the Constitution, the situation could be very, very complicated in 2026. So I think, we hope that the institutions could be protected until 2026. I have 1 year and a half with the President Petro, and I said was the last year I think was the most difficult time of personal time and of course my wife time, because she's with me, so she knows exactly how was the situation without us, because we have a lot of security. Exactly, my family is part of my family is not in Colombia, etc., etc. But we have to be optimistic, and we hope that the institutions of Colombia could survive and could stand that government. And thank you very much for your question.
All right, let's do 2 more questions. We'll do one right here. Yes, yep, you. Yes, you. And we'll do one more. The second, yes.
Okay, so my name is Pia. I'm from Mexico. First of all, thank you for being here. It's truly an honor to have you here. And my question goes to anyone that wants to answer. I remember that last semester you talked a lot about the value of mistakes and to learn from it. So my question is, what has been one of your biggest mistakes, what you learned from it, and how that impacted your future career?
Let's say mistakes in office, in public service. Should we go one by one? Ambassador?
I would say that in our case, we underestimated the real nature of the regime and also underestimated the support of autocrats surrounding Maduro. And that's what, here we are. So that's what we need to learn from this, for us internally, but also from the international community. Autocrats are working together to preserve their dictatorships around the globe. So we need to be together as activists defending democracy, but also the Western democracies supporting the people who want a change, but also confronting, and I would say, the enemies of the Western values. And if we don't have that clear, they will win the battle. If we understand this, I think we will have better future for democracy.
Chairman?
I'm going to speak generally, and I shared a little bit of this with the students earlier today. But early in my career, I was a little bit more shy, timid, reserved, and didn't trust my gut. And when you have people discouraging, saying that's not possible, I would cede to that. And things didn't happen that maybe could have happened. And just for all the women especially who are listening, don't do that. Listen to your gut. And I remember once I was trying to do something with the U.S. State Department. And this is when I was in the private sector, but I got some grant funding to do something amazing overseas. And I had an email from a person saying, that's not possible and that's not going to happen. And by golly, that was a challenge to me. And I worked triple time. And what that person said was not possible happened in an amazing way to make a difference for a lot of people. And had I listened to that, it wouldn't have happened. And so that's a mistake, but from that, and any mistake, I think, any failure that you have, those are the best learning lessons in life. And those are what help you be really strong and be a better leader. You're going to have those, and it's going to devastate you. Just take it in, learn from it, and pivot to become better going forward.
Well, no, I think the real, maybe underestimate the press.
The president.
The press, the media. Yes, because at the beginning was extremely complicated, the relation between press and Attorney General. Then I understood. And I understood quickly, and then I understood exactly quickly how could be that relationship between Attorney General and the press, and was interesting that kind of improvement during my term. And then, of course, when you realize that situation, you could understand a lot of things around you. You can create a good team. First of all, you have to know that you are not alone in the leadership. You have to create a great team to give them the possibility to understand that the leadership is not one person, it's a team, and you have to pass from the individuality to the social, to the social. I think is extremely important that, but I think my difficulty at the beginning was the press, and I didn't understand that. Even the way in which I have to communicate to the people in my country, because at the beginning I'm a lawyer, so I'm a PhD at the public law in France. So I was, my principal concern was to communicate to the judges, so to the lawyers, etc., etc. And then I realized that wasn't my problem. The problem is I have to communicate to the people, because I change every single word in order to the people understand exactly what was the work that we are making in my office. So I think was interesting, but of course that allowed me to create a great team, good leadership, of course, in my office, a group of that people that articulate, and of course a lot of itinerancy in our country in order to understand that Colombia is composed by 32 Colombias. We have 32 departments or regions, but those regions are absolutely different. We talk the same language, or we speak the same language, but at the same time we are not having in different regions the same way to life and the same way to even to act, and that's why it's extremely interesting to communicate, to teach community understanding that. So this is my view.
Con relación a la pregunta de un error, probablemente cometí más de uno, pero el que se me viene a la mente ahora a comentar es pensar que mis opositores políticos actuarían respetando, como yo lo hice, los más caros principios y valores democráticos. El respeto a la Constitución, el respeto a la ley y sobre todo pensar en el interés público el interés común de todos los ecuatorianos por encima del interés personal o político de ellos. Creo yo que ese fue uno de los errores por los que he pagado más alto precio.
Probably made more than one error, but one that comes to mind is thinking that his political opponents would follow the same democratic rules that he followed, respect for the rule of law, respect for democracy. And so not realizing that they wouldn't do that is the one that comes to mind. All right, we're over time, but I said one more question, making sure it's brief, and yes, go for it. No, up here, front, student, yep, thank you.
Hello, my name is Carlos Rodriguez Lopez. I'm a poli-sci student here at FIU, and I'm also a Venezuelan. My question is for Ambassador Vecchio. I'll try to make it brief. In your introduction, you stated that the opposition has taken the decision to go through the electoral route. However, with the recent fallout of the Barbosa Agreement, the barring of Maria Corina Machado to run for presidential candidate, and the increasing freezing of relations between the U.S. and the Maduro regime, is the unitary platform considering a scenario where they will participate in elections without the participation of Maria Corina Machado? Thank you.
Maria Corina Machado was elected in a primaries done last year. He was elected by 2.3 million Venezuelans. We need to respect the popular will, and we need to defend Maria Corina. As I said at the beginning, politics is not static, it's dynamic. And we need to move the current environment, politically speaking, internally and from abroad. And I think this is a great opportunity to do that. So in my view, it shouldn't be any doubt that we need to defend the will of the people. And the will of the people is that Maria Corina Machado will represent the desire for change. I'm not talking about the opposition. The desire of the Venezuelans who would like to be free again. So, and that's the direction that we need to go. Internally, and also getting the support of the international community to back Maria Corina to become our candidate and to have free and fair election for all Venezuelans. That's the challenge. Is that easy? It's not. It's not. Because as I said, we are dealing with a criminal organization in power supported by the enemies of the United States. That's the challenge. And I said, I'm very optimistic because the majority of our people, as you know better than me, we would like to see a change in my country. And that's the fight. And that's why we need to support, again, what the people decided last year. Maria Corina is the only candidate of the opposition and also of the people who want a change in my country, in our country.
Thank you. These have been terrific questions. I want to highlight one of the questions, the question about mistakes, because one of the things that the fellows are going to do in their classes is not just to talk about their successes and the many things they did, but also talk about the things that they got wrong. And so this is a theme that it's going to be common throughout the semester because you can learn a lot from your mistakes, and they're going to be very open in discussing those mistakes. The Attorney General, as you can imagine, will be talking about the rule of law in Latin America and the importance of the rule of law. The ambassador will be talking about how to run an embassy on fire and how to build bipartisan support for foreign policy objectives. And the chairman and the president will be talking about very complementary topics from different perspectives, how to transition from the private to the public sector, and what are some of the lessons of leadership in the private and the public sectors, in the case of the chairman in the United States, and in the case of the president in Latin America. So we're going to have 8 sessions apiece that are going to be enlightening. I encourage all the students to sign up. We're going to do more public events. But I want to conclude this one by thanking you for being here and for your service for the many years that you've been in public service. Thank you.